What does it feel like to be a target, not as an individual caught in the crosshairs of some terrestrial conflict, but as a species? What does it feel like when the weapon aimed at you is not forged by human hands, but is a relic from the birth of the solar system itself? A weapon of impossible scale, moving at incomprehensible speed, obeying only the silent, unforgiving laws of gravity. This isn't a hypothetical question. It is the fundamental unspoken condition of our existence, a truth we spend our entire lives attempting to ignore. We are adrift in a cosmic shooting gallery, and the universe has been taking aim at us for 4.5 billion years. The evidence is etched into the very bones of our planet. It's written in layers of iridium dust, the spectral ghost of an impact that ended the 150 million year reign of the dinosaurs. A 10-kilometer wide mountain of rock and ice, striking with the force of 10 billion atomic bombs, turning the sky to fire and the oceans to acid. It was a geological reset button, a punctuation mark in the story of life that nearly ended the sentence altogether. That scar, the Chicxulub crater, is now hidden beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, a buried tombstone for a lost world. We tell ourselves that was the ancient past, a primordial violence belonging to a younger, more chaotic solar system. We convince ourselves that the heavens have grown quiet, that the era of titans clashing has passed. We build our cities, our civilizations under the comforting illusion of a peaceful sky. But the sky has never been peaceful. Its silence is a lie. On a summer morning in 1,908 inches, the remote, desolate forests of Siberia, the universe reminded us of this truth. There was no warning, no portent in the heavens. There was only light. A column of fire brighter than the sun seared the sky above the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. Moments later, a wave of pressure, an invisible tsunami of air, flattened 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers of wilderness. The blast registered on seismographs across Europe and Asia, its atmospheric shockwaves circling the globe twice. For days afterward, the skies over London and Stockholm glowed with an eerie, silvery light, so bright that people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. Yet for decades, the cause remained a profound mystery. No crater was ever found, no fragments of a meteorite recovered. It was a ghost impact, an event of terrifying power that left behind only devastation and questions. We now understand it was an airburst, a fragile asteroid or comet perhaps 60 meters across, that detonated with the force of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs miles above the ground, vaporizing before it could strike. It was a warning shot, a demonstration of cosmic power delivered to one of the most uninhabited places on Earth. Had it arrived just 4 hours later, its trajectory would have carried it over St. Petersburg, the bustling capital of the Russian Empire. The history of the 20th century and the lives of millions would have been instantly and irrevocably rewritten by a stray piece of celestial debris. It was a roll of the cosmic dice, and we got lucky. We would need that luck again. On February 15th, 2013, the dice were rolled once more. This time the world was watching. Over the Russian city of Chelyabinsk, a new artificial sun blazed into existence. A 20-meter asteroid, a fragment of a much larger body, entered the atmosphere at over 60,000 kilometers per hour. To the people on the ground, it was a moment of pure cognitive dissonance. A silent, impossibly bright streak painting itself across the cold morning sky, followed by a trail of smoke and dust. For nearly 2 minutes, an unsettling quiet hung in the air. People gathered at their windows, pulled out their phones, mesmerized by the strange beauty of the spectacle. They had no idea that the light was traveling far faster than the sound. They didn't know that the shockwave was coming. When it arrived, it was with the sudden, brutal force of a physical blow, a deafening, window-shattering explosion that ripped through the city, injuring over 1,500 people. It was the most powerful impact event humanity had witnessed in over a century, and it was captured from 1,000 different angles. Dashcams, security footage, mobile phones, all of it created a mosaic of a world suddenly made aware of its own fragility. We saw in visceral detail what a relatively small rock can do to a modern city. The Chelyabinsk meteor was a cosmic firecracker compared to the Tunguska event, which itself was a mere spark compared to the Chicxulub impactor. Yet it served as a brutal 21st century reminder. The threat is not ancient history. It is not hypothetical. The shooting gallery is still open for business, and these objects are coming constantly. For every Chelyabinsk that strikes, there are thousands of near misses, silent passages in the night that go completely unnoticed by the world below. Some, however, pass close enough to make the blood run cold. In 2019, an asteroid designated 2019, a city killer over 100 meters wide, slipped past us at a distance of only 70,000 kilometers. That's less than 1/5 of the distance to the moon. In cosmic terms, it was a bullet grazing our temple, and the most terrifying part, we didn't see it coming. Its trajectory was aligned with the glare of the sun, a celestial blind spot. We only knew of its existence a few hours before it made its closest approach. By the time we saw it, it was already screaming past us, a gravitational ghost disappearing back into the void. How many more are out there lurking in the sun's glare, their orbits still unplotted, their timelines intersecting with our own in ways we cannot yet predict? This is the fear that drives the global network of Planetary Defense, a tireless, sleepless watch where astronomers scan the heavens, cataloguing these nomads of the void, running simulations, calculating probabilities. They are the sentinels on the wall, searching for the one shadow, the one faint glint of light on a collision course. For decades, their work has been a quiet academic pursuit, a preventative science operating largely in the background of public consciousness. It has been a process of watching, waiting, and hoping. Until now, because something has changed. The quiet process of observation has been shattered by a single explosive piece of information, a document that was never meant to see the light of day. It began not with a thunderous explosion in the sky, but with the quietest of digital whispers. A leaked email. It's a sterile technical document stripped of all emotion, which only adds to its chilling effect. It bears the markings of multiple international space agencies, and more disturbingly, several high-level military and defense contractors. Its subject line is deceptively simple: Joint Task Force Directive 77A-Q1 Preparedness Scenario. The language inside is dense, filled with acronyms and jargon, a coded dialect designed to obscure, not to clarify. But for those with the clearance to understand it, the message is unambiguous. It outlines the final phase of something called the Arecibo Protocol. It details the mobilization of assets, deep space tracking arrays, orbital kinetic platforms, high-energy laser systems, based in locations that are officially denied to exist. It speaks of engagement, windows, deflection vectors, and terminal phase observation, and it gives a date, this January. The document describes in cold, precise terms an active and imminent planetary defense test, a live-fire exercise on a scale never before imagined. The target for this unprecedented global drill is not some mundane, well-understood piece of local space rock. The target is something far stranger, something that has already captured the imagination of the scientific world. An object designated 3I, Atlas. The I, in its name, tells you everything you need to know about why this object is so special. It stands for Interstellar. 3I, Atlas, is not from here. It is not a child of our Sunday. It did not form from the same primordial disk of gas and dust that created Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. It is a traveler, a refugee from another solar system wandering the galactic wilderness for millions, perhaps billions of years. It was born in a different crucible, under the light of a different star, a star we may never be able to identify. Its journey through the desolate, frozen expanse between the suns is a testament to the sheer scale of time and space. Most interstellar objects are fleeting visitors. We glimpse them as they fall through our system, whip around the sun, and are flung back out into the darkness, never to be seen again. They are ghosts, leaving behind only tantalizingly brief trails of data. But 3I, Atlas, is different. For reasons that are still the subject of fierce debate, its trajectory is decaying. It is not behaving as a simple rock or comet should. It's slowing down in a way that our models of gravity and solar radiation cannot fully explain. It isn't just passing through, it's staying. This bizarre orbital behavior has made it a scientific enigma, a puzzle box delivered to our doorstep from an unknown sender. What is it made of? What forces have acted upon it during its eons-long voyage? And why, of all the infinite paths it could have taken through the galaxy, Did it choose this one ending, here in our system now? And this is the object, this alien artifact, this messenger from another star that the world's most powerful nations have apparently chosen as a target for a secret globally coordinated weapons test. The leaked email transforms 3I, Atlas, from a scientific curiosity into the centerpiece of a terrifying geopolitical drama. The questions it raises are immediate and profound. Firstly, is this document even real? In an age of sophisticated disinformation, it could be an elaborate hoax designed to sow panic or discord. But security analysts who have examined its metadata, its digital signature, claim it is authentic. It originated from a secure server passed through encrypted channels and was intended for a very small, very select audience. Its leak represents a catastrophic breach of security, a crack in the wall of silence that surrounds the world's most sensitive operations. If it is real, then the next question becomes almost too frightening to contemplate. Why now? And why this object, a planetary defense test, sounds reassuring like a fire drill. But you don't typically conduct a fire drill in a building that's already burning. Is the term test a euphemism, a carefully chosen piece of terminology to mask a far more urgent reality? Are we simply practicing our aim using this strange visitor as a convenient celestial clay pigeon to test our capabilities for a future threat? That is the best case scenario. That this is a drill, a proactive, if stunningly aggressive show of force against the void. A declaration that we are no longer the helpless dinosaurs staring blankly at our own doom. But there is a darker possibility. What if this isn't a drill at all? What if the strange, unpredictable decay of 3I Atlas's orbit isn't just a scientific curiosity, but a calculated threat? What if the data we are seeing, the deceleration our models can't explain, is pointing toward a conclusion so alarming that it has triggered this secret emergency protocol, a conclusion that this interstellar visitor is on a collision course, not in 1,000,000 years, not in 1,000, but now. In that scenario, the test becomes a desperate last-ditch attempt to deflect an imminent impactor, an act of global defense played out in the shadows, hidden from the public, to prevent a worldwide panic that could be as destructive as the impact itself. Suddenly, the secrecy makes a terrifying kind of sense. The mobilization of classified military assets, the carefully managed language, it all points to a crisis being managed at the highest levels, a planetary emergency that the rest of us are not yet meant to understand. We are being protected not just from the rock, but from the truth of its arrival. The implications are staggering. We would be living in the final days of a quiet world, while a secret war for our survival is being planned in orbit above our heads. A war against an enemy of stone and ice that doesn't even know we exist. And yet, there is a third possibility whispered in the most secure corners of the internet, a theory that lies on the very fringe of science, but one that this situation forces us to consider. The behavior of 3I, Atlas, is anomalous. Its trajectory is unnatural. What if the object itself is also unnatural? The last interstellar visitor to capture our attention, the enigmatic Oumuamua, was so strange in its behavior, its shape, its acceleration away from the sun, that it led some of the world's most respected astronomers to posit a radical hypothesis that it was not a natural object at all but a piece of alien technology, a probe, a solar sail, a relic from a civilization long dead. That theory was and remains highly controversial. But now we are faced with another interstellar object exhibiting equally baffling behavior. Is it possible that the Planetary Defense Test is not a test and not a deflection, but something else entirely? A first contact protocol of the most aggressive kind imaginable, an attempt to intercept, to disable, or even to capture something that we have determined is not just a rock. The idea is almost too vast to hold in your mind, but the question must be asked. Are we preparing to defend ourselves not just from a mindless celestial collision, but from a deliberate unknown intelligence? Is this the real reason for the secrecy, the true nature of the Arecibo Protocol? An answer to a question humanity has been asking for millennia, delivered not through friendly communication, but through the crosshairs of a weapon, a drill, a genuine threat, or something far, far stranger. These are the three terrifying paths that lie before us. The leaked email is our only map, and the trajectory of 3I, Atlas, is the ticking clock. As January approaches, we must pull on these threads, decode the jargon, and uncover the truth. For somewhere hidden behind layers of classification and official denial, a plan is in motion. And the fate of our world may very well depend on whether we can find out what it is before it's too late. What does a planet remember if the Earth could dream it would dream of fire? Of skies ripped open and a violence so profound it boiled the oceans and scoured the continents clean. These are not merely nightmares, but faint geologic echoes of a past we have long forgotten. Our ancestors huddled in caves and around flickering flames knew this truth in their bones. They painted it on rock walls, wove it into their myths. Dragons and feathered serpents, sky gods hurling thunderbolts, celestial battles waged in the heavens above. For millennia, these were dismissed as apocryphal tales, the fanciful imaginings of a pre-scientific mind. But we are now beginning to understand that these stories might be a form of inherited memory, a cultural scar left behind by progenitors who witnessed firsthand the fury of the cosmos. They saw a sky that was not a peaceful, predictable clockwork, but a shooting gallery. And we, their descendants, are only just relearning how to look up with that same primal mixture of awe and terror. The amnesia of a comfortable civilization is a fragile thing. It was a comet that began to wake us from our slumber. Not one that struck us, but one that struck a neighbor, a cosmic spectacle played out on a planetary stage. In 1994, humanity turned its collective gaze toward Jupiter, as the shattered fragments of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 plunged one by one into its colossal atmosphere. We watched mesmerized as fireballs larger than our own world erupted from the clouds, leaving dark, bruised scars that lingered for months. It was a profound and sobering moment. We were not just seeing astronomy. We were witnessing a planetary assault, a vivid demonstration of the raw power that lurks in the quiet darkness between the worlds. The impact sites on Jupiter were a stark message written across the solar system, a warning that the Age of Dragons was not over. The dragons were real. They were simply made of rock and ice, following the unforgiving laws of gravity. And our own world, a tiny, fragile blue marble, was not immune. The question was no longer times if times an object could strike the Earth, but times when times the next one would. A quiet revolution began, not with a bang, but with the soft hum of computers and the slow, deliberate swivel of telescopes. The grand endeavor of planetary defense was born from this revelation. It is one of the youngest and most critical fields of human science, a discipline tasked with the single monumental goal of ensuring our species does not go the way of the dinosaurs. This is not the work of lone geniuses in secluded observatories, but a global coordinated effort, a planetary immune system in its infancy. At its heart are the digital sentinels, the robotic eyes that tirelessly scan the heavens. Programs like Pan-STARRS in Hawaii and the Catalina Sky Survey in Arizona stand as our watchtowers on the cosmic ocean. They are designed to chart the unseen currents, to find those faint ephemeral points of light moving against the backdrop of fixed stars. Each night they gather petabytes of data, a torrent of information so vast that no human could ever hope to sift through it. Instead, sophisticated algorithms perform the initial triage, flagging anything that moves, anything that has changed since the previous night's observation. These are our digital prospectors panning for the glint of potential danger in a river of celestial noise. Among these guardians, one system is unique, designed not just to find the threats, but to find them at the last possible moment. It is called Atlas, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Its name is a frank admission of its purpose. Comprised of telescopes in Hawaii, Chile, and South Africa, Atlas scans the entire visible sky every 24 hours. It is our tripwire. Its mission is to find the smaller city, killer-sized asteroids, the ones that slip through the wider nets, giving us hopefully a few weeks of warning. Enough time to evacuate a city, enough time to prepare. The people who run these systems are a special breed of astronomer. They are the Night Watch. While you sleep, they are at their monitors sipping coffee, their screens filled with streaks of light, columns of numbers and orbital plots that arc through the solar system like ghostly filaments. They are searching for the anomalous, the unexpected. They track near-Earth objects, or NEOs, mapping their trajectories with incredible precision, projecting their paths decades, even centuries into the future. They are the architects of a grand cosmic catalogue, an ever-growing list of every known object that could one day cross our path. It is meticulous, often tedious work. Night after night, year after year, the census grows. Each new discovery, each numbered and named asteroid is a potential bullet, catalogued, its trajectory understood, and the threat neutralized by knowledge. They are building a shield of pure information. This global network of astronomers and observatories communicates through a central nervous system, the Minor Planet Center, and coordinates through bodies like the International Asteroid Warning Network. When one telescope spots a potential new threat, a call goes out. Around the world, other instruments pause their own surveys and turn their gaze to the new coordinates, gathering more data points. Each observation refines the orbit, shrinking the zone of uncertainty, turning a fuzzy probability into a sharply defined path. It is a quiet international collaboration that transcends politics, a silent pact among scientists who understand the universal nature of the threat. The sky does not recognize borders. A rock falling from space is an enemy to all humankind. For years, this system has worked quietly and efficiently in the background of our daily lives. They have found thousands of near-Earth asteroids, tracked comets swinging in from the cold abyss of the Oort cloud, and provided the data that assures us for now that no major known object poses a significant threat. The system was designed for the familiar dangers for the rocks and debris born from our own solar system, the local traffic. It was not, however, fully prepared for a ghost. On a cold, clear night, as the Atlas telescopes conducted their relentless sweeping search, an automated detection algorithm flagged a new object. This in itself was not unusual. The system flags dozens, sometimes hundreds of potential candidates every night. Most are quickly identified as known asteroids or satellites. But this one was different. Designated A10BMLZ, it was exceptionally faint, a barely perceptible smear of pixels pushing the very limits of the telescope's sensitivity. Yet it was moving with a purpose that caught the software's attention. The initial data points were sparse, the orbital arc too short to be certain of anything. But it was enough. The flag went up. Across the globe, as the Earth turned, other observatories received the alert and began to train their more powerful instruments on that precise patch of sky. They were hunting for a ghost. Over the next 72 hours, a fuller picture began to emerge, and with it a deep and unsettling mystery. The object was not following the gentle elliptical path of a typical asteroid, a path that would inevitably bring it back around the Sunday. Its trajectory was a dramatic, sweeping hyperbola. This was a mathematical certainty, a stark geometric truth that sent a shiver through the astronomical community. A hyperbolic trajectory means one thing: the object is moving too fast to be captured by the sun's gravity. It was not born of our solar system. It was a tourist, a traveller from the interstellar deep, briefly passing through our neighbourhood before being flung back out into the unending night between the stars. We had seen such visitors before, the bizarre cigar-shaped Oumuamua in 2017 and the more conventional comet-like Borisov in 2019. They were celestial curiosities, messengers from other star systems that offered a tantalizing, fleeting glimpse into the chemistry and dynamics of unknown worlds. They were scientifically priceless, but they were also harmless, their paths taking them far from Earth. This new visitor, now officially designated 3I, Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object, was different. Its trajectory was troubling. As more data poured in, the orbit was refined with unnerving accuracy. It was on a path that would bring it through the inner solar system, crossing the orbital planes of Mars, Earth, and Venus. While initial calculations showed it would miss our planet, the miss distance was small by cosmic standards, uncomfortably small. But the trajectory alone was not what caused the hushed, urgent conversations to begin on encrypted servers and private forums among the world's top planetary scientists. It was the object's physical nature. Spectroscopic analysis, the process of breaking down its reflected light to determine its composition, yielded bizarre results. It wasn't a barren, rocky asteroid, nor was it a typical comet spewing a brilliant tail of gas and dust as the sun's warmth vaporized its ice. It had a strange, faint coma, a tenuous atmosphere of gas, but the gases detected were not the expected water vapor or carbon monoxide. The readings were confusing, showing signatures of complex organic molecules and heavy metals that had no business being in a comet's coma. It seemed to be a hybrid, something that defied easy categorization. A rocky body that was somehow gently outgassing. Furthermore, it was dark, incredibly dark. Its albedo, a measure of its reflectivity, was lower than that of fresh asphalt, absorbing over 97% of the light that fell upon it. This made it extraordinarily difficult to see, and it implied its size was much larger than its faintness would suggest. The initial estimates were staggering, placing its diameter somewhere between 1 and 3 kilometers. An object of that size traveling at interstellar velocities would not be a city killer, it would be a civilization ender. An impact would trigger a global cataclysm, an extinction-level event dwarfing the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. The energy released would be millions of times greater than the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated, creating a firestorm that would engulf the planet and plunge it into a dark, frozen winter lasting for decades. The sheer scale of the potential devastation was difficult to comprehend, a threat so immense it felt abstract, unreal. And yet the numbers on the screen were intractable. The object was real. The final piece of the puzzle, the detail that transformed quiet concern into palpable dread, was the detection of a subtle non-gravitational acceleration. The object was not moving according to the laws of orbital mechanics alone. Something else was pushing it ever so slightly. For a normal comet, this is expected. The outgassing of jets of vapor acts like a tiny, unpredictable rocket engine. But the outgassing from 3I, Atlas, was too faint, too weak to account for the observed deviation in its path. It was as if the ghost had a will of its own, its trajectory shifting by margins that were small but significant enough to render long-term predictions unreliable. The cone of uncertainty around its future position, instead of shrinking with more observation, remained stubbornly large. And within that cone of possibility, that narrow range of potential paths it might take, lay the Earth. The chances of an impact were still minuscule, statistically insignificant, 1 in millions, but they were not zero. And for the men and women of the planetary defense community, a non-zero probability for an extinction-level event is a scenario that demands absolute attention. In the weeks that followed its discovery, an unnerving silence descended from the official channels. The object was given its designation, its basic orbital data was published to the Minor Planet Center as per standard procedure, but there were no press releases from NASA, no grand announcements from the European Space Agency. Seasoned astronomers and space journalists who followed these discoveries noted the quiet. It was a silence that spoke volumes. Behind the scenes, the world's most powerful telescopes, both on the ground and in space, were being retasked. Instruments that were meant to be peering into the dawn of the universe were now staring intently at a single, faint, dark object moving inexorably toward us. The data being collected was shared only on secured networks accessible to a select few. The world's experts were watching, calculating, and debating. What was this thing, a natural yet bizarrely formed interstellar wanderer? Or something else entirely? The questions multiplied and the answers remained locked away from public view. The great global system designed to protect humanity by sharing information had suddenly gone quiet. The watchman on the wall had seen something in the dark and they were not telling us what it was. They were waiting, planning, and preparing for a rendezvous set for the cold heart of January, a date with an anomaly that was now much more than just a scientific curiosity. It had become a secret, and just like that, the carefully curated silence of the cosmos was shattered by the frantic glow of 1 billion screens. The leak was no longer a piece of classified data. It had become a global event, an information shockwave propagating at the speed of light across the very networks designed to connect us. It didn't trickle into the public consciousness, it detonated. Within hours, the hashtags were trending, the forums were ablaze, and every news outlet on the planet was scrambling to understand what they were even looking at. Was it a hoax, a warning, or the prelude to the most consequential moment in human history? The email, with its chillingly bureaucratic tone, discussing a planetary defense test against an interstellar visitor, had become the central mystery of our time. The official response when it came was a masterclass in coordinated deflection. From Washington to Brussels, from Moscow to Beijing, the message was uniform delivered through stony-faced press secretaries and carefully worded digital statements. They built a fortress of denial, its walls mortared with a lexicon of ambiguity. The email's authenticity could not be verified. The language pointed to a sophisticated forgery. The trajectory data was preliminary and subject to significant revision. They spoke of standard contingency planning of drills and simulations that were perpetually ongoing, arguing this was merely a misinterpretation of routine preparedness. They painted a picture of calm, of control, of a world where cosmic surprises were anticipated and managed, not feared. They wanted you to believe this was a false alarm, a digital ghost born of paranoia, but their very composure felt wrong. The denials were too quick, too synchronized, as if they were reading from a script prepared long in advance. For a world grown skeptical of institutional narratives, this wall of official repudiation was not a reassurance. It was a red flag. It felt less like a clarification and more like a containment strategy, an attempt to force the genie of information not back into the bottle, but into a smaller, more manageable container. Every carefully chosen word of dismissal seemed only to lend more weight to the possibility that the leak was terrifyingly real. The harder they pushed back, the more the global public leaned in, convinced that such a powerful and united front of denial could only be assembled to conceal an equally powerful truth. The silence from the specific scientists named in the memo was perhaps the most deafening response of all, a vacuum of comment that spoke volumes. While the monoliths of government and space exploration presented their united front, a new kind of investigation was already underway, one that could not be controlled by press releases or official channels. A decentralized global brain composed of thousands of independent astronomers, amateur skywatchers, data scientists, and citizen journalists began its own forensic analysis. They were the digital detectives unburdened by security clearances or political allegiances, driven by a pure and insatiable curiosity. They pulled the publicly available data from observatories around the world, the raw, unfiltered light from 3i, Atlas, and began to interrogate it. They formed collaborations in encrypted chat rooms and on sprawling forum threads, sharing code, debating theories, and checking each other's math in a relentless 24/7 cycle of peer review. Their first battle was over the email itself. Digital forensics experts tore it apart bit by bit. They analyzed the header information, searching for inconsistencies in the server pathways, looking for the telltale signs of a spoof. Some argued the technical jargon was slightly off the acronyms, subtly misused in a way an insider never would. They pointed to the convenient drama of the leak, suggesting it was a masterfully crafted piece of fiction designed to go viral. It was they claimed the ultimate conspiracy theory for an age already drowning in them. Yet for every analyst who cried hoax, another found evidence of authenticity. They pointed to the metadata's complexity, arguing that faking it to this level would require a nation-state's resources. They noted that the scientific concepts discussed while alarming were not fantasy. They were extrapolations of very real, very current conversations happening within the closed doors of planetary defense circles. The document's very dryness, its lack of overt panic, felt more authentic to them than any Hollywood-style warning ever could. This debate raged a digital civil war, fought in lines of code and probability arguments, leaving the rest of us suspended between two terrifying possibilities: that we were being manipulated by an elaborate lie, or that we were being lied to by our own protectors. But the email was only the trigger. The real mystery, the one that could not be faked, was the object itself. As the independent analysts filtered out the noise and focused their collective intelligence on 3i, Atlas the data began to whisper a story far stranger than any forged document. The first and most glaring anomaly was its trajectory. We know how gravity works. We have mapped the subtle gravitational pathways of our solar system with breathtaking precision. An object falling in from interstellar space should follow a predictable path, a graceful open-ended curve known as a hyperbola, shaped only by the immense influence of our Sunday. 3i, Atlas, was for the most part following that script, but there were deviations, tiny, almost imperceptible, yet persistent and undeniable. It was exhibiting what astronomers call non-gravitational acceleration. It was moving as if a ghostly hand were gently nudging it off its natural course. The immediate explanation for such a phenomenon in a comet is outgassing. As the sun heats a comet's icy surface, jets of gas and dust erupt, acting like miniature thrusters that can alter its path. This is what makes comets so beautifully unpredictable. So the telescopes hunted for the evidence for the telltale fuzzy halo of a coma and the gossamer streamer of a tail. They found nothing. The light from 3I, Atlas, was sharp, a single solitary point against the black. There was no dust, no gas, no vapor, at least none that our most powerful instruments could detect. Yet the push was there, a minute, persistent, anomalous thrust with no visible cause. It was as if we were watching a cosmic billiard ball subtly correcting its own course across the felt of space-time. It was a contradiction wrapped in a paradox, a behavior that defied our neat categorization of celestial bodies. This was not a dirty snowball. This was something else. The next layer of the enigma was revealed when they analyzed its light, breaking it down into a spectrum to read its elemental fingerprint. Spectroscopy is our way of asking an object, "What are you made of?" Across billions of miles of vacuum, the light from 3I, Atlas, carried the secrets of its composition. Astronomers expected to find the familiar signatures of silicates, carbon compounds, and perhaps the faint trace of water ice, the standard building blocks of asteroids and comets we know. Instead, the results that came back were deeply puzzling. The object's surface, its albedo, was far more reflective than a typical comet or a carbonaceous asteroid. It wasn't mirror bright, but it was catching and returning the sun's light with an unnerving efficiency. Then came the spectral lines themselves. The expected signatures were weak, almost absent. In their place were subtle peaks in the spectrum that hinted at a composition rich in certain metals, but in ratios that did not match known meteorite classes or the predicted makeup of interstellar wanderers. There was a frustrating lack of clarity with some data, suggesting a surface unlike anything ever catalogued, while other readings remained maddeningly inconclusive. It was a chemical riddle. It absorbed certain wavelengths of light in a way that suggested a structure both complex and unnatural. This wasn't the simple primordial chemistry of a rock left over from the dawn of another star system. It felt processed. It felt deliberate. The light bouncing off 3I, Atlas, wasn't telling us the story of its birth. It was concealing it behind a reflective, unreadable mask. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery, however, came from what is known as its light curve. By measuring the object's brightness over time, we can learn about its shape and how it rotates. A potato-shaped asteroid tumbling through space will have a complex, varying flicker as its different-sized surfaces catch the sunlight. The light curve of 3I Atlas was different. It was shockingly regular. It pulsed with a precise, unwavering periodicity, its brightness rising and falling with the rhythm of a cosmic metronome. This wasn't the chaotic tumble of a natural rock. A chaotic spin is in fact the most stable state for an irregularly shaped body over long cosmic timescales. To maintain such a perfectly ordered rotation, an object would need to be either remarkably, almost impossibly symmetrical in its shape and density, or it would need to be dynamically stabilized. Its rotation was too clean, too stable for a journey of millions, perhaps billions of years through the turbulent interstellar medium. It was spinning not like a thrown rock, but like a gyroscope, maintaining a serene and steadfast orientation on its journey through our solar system. The data suggested an object that was in a state of perfect principal axis rotation, the most stable and energy-efficient way for an object to spin. For a natural object to achieve this state and maintain it after a violent ejection from its home system and a long, lonely voyage is statistically improbable in the extreme. For the independent analysts, this was the moment the ground truly shifted beneath their feet. The trajectory was strange, the composition was a puzzle, but the rotation felt like a message. It spoke of an inherent engineered stability. It was the mechanical heartbeat of a thing that could not be merely a random fragment of nature. Each of these anomalies taken in isolation could perhaps be bent to fit a natural explanation, however unlikely. An unseen outgassing of a transparent exotic gas could explain the trajectory. A unique and never-before-seen class of interstellar asteroid could account for the strange composition, an incredibly rare coincidental shape and spin state could in theory produce the stable light curve. Proponents of the official narrative clung to these possibilities, stringing together a chain of improbable coincidences to maintain the illusion of normalcy. But science is a process of seeking the simplest explanation that fits all the facts. And as the independent community laid the three anomalies on top of one another, the controlled trajectory, the unusual surface, the stabilized rotation, a new, far simpler and infinitely more terrifying picture began to emerge. These were not three separate improbable events. They were correlated data points describing a single cohesive entity. They were the distinct observable characteristics of an object that was not behaving like a product of celestial chaos. It was behaving as if it were under control. Suddenly, the leaked email didn't seem like a paranoid fantasy anymore. It felt like an understatement. It felt like the only explanation that honored the bizarre accumulating evidence. The data pouring in from the heavens was beginning to align perfectly with the forbidden text spreading across the Earth. The Planetary Defense Test mentioned in the email was no longer an abstract concept for a hypothetical threat. It was a specific plan for a specific target on a specific date, and that target was now demonstrating through the irrefutable language of physics that it was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The argument was no longer about whether the email was real. The new terrifying question rising in the minds of scientists and citizens alike was whether the test it described was nearly enough. The clock was ticking not just toward a date on a calendar, but toward a fundamental redefinition of our place in the universe. The digital dam already fractured by that first cryptic email was never going to hold. For weeks, the official narrative had been one of serene dismissal, a collective institutional pat on the head, assuring us that the shadows we saw were just tricks of the light. They told us 3I. Atlas was a curiosity, a footnote in the celestial catalogue, nothing more. But in the global interconnected network that has become humanity's central nervous system, a secret is no longer a lockbox. It is a current, and it will always find a path to ground. The next surge of electricity didn't come from an anonymous insider in an American agency. It came from halfway around the world, from a place renowned for its meticulous precision and its quiet, unassuming excellence, the European Southern Observatory in the high, dry air of the Atacama Desert. It wasn't an email this time. It was something far more damning, far more difficult to deny. It was raw data. A compressed file just under 2 gigabytes appeared without fanfare on a decentralized encrypted file-sharing network favored by academics and whistleblowers. The file name was a simple, elegant string of characters: VLT, Spectro, 3I, Atlas, Raw. For the amateur astronomers and rogue astrophysicists who had been chasing this phantom across the sky, it was the Dead Sea Scrolls. Within hours, the file had been decrypted, its contents spilling out onto the screens of 1,000 citizen scientists. This was not a blurry, long-range photograph or a second-hand account. This was a complete spectrographic analysis from the Very Large Telescope, one of the most powerful optical instruments on the planet. Spectroscopy is the science of cosmic fingerprints. By breaking down the light from a distant object into its constituent colors, its rainbow scientists can determine with breathtaking accuracy what it is made of. The data was undeniable, peer-reviewed in a chaotic, global real-time frenzy. And the fingerprint it revealed, for 3I, Atlas, belonged to nothing we had ever seen before. It contained absorption lines for known elements, iron, nickel, silicates, but they were arranged in a crystalline structure so bizarre, so impossibly uniform, that it defied natural formation. More chillingly, there were emission spikes in the radio spectrum, faint but rhythmic, that were not the chaotic hiss of a natural comet or asteroid. They were structured, they were coherent. It was the equivalent of finding a printed circuit board inside a piece of volcanic rock. The data didn't just suggest the object was artificial, it screamed it from the void. The official story of a mundane long-period comet was not just wrong, it was now a demonstrable, provable lie. The silence from the world's governments that followed was of a different kind than before. It was no longer the silence of dismissal, but the deep, profound silence of a chess grandmaster realizing their opponent has made a move they never anticipated. The usual mouthpieces, the press secretaries and agency spokespeople were nowhere to be found. For 48 agonizing hours, the planet held its breath, the VLT data ricocheting through every news channel, every social media feed, every corner of the web. The lie had been exposed, but the truth remained terrifyingly out of reach. We had moved beyond conspiracy theory and into a state of global cognitive dissonance. We had irrefutable proof of something. And the people in charge, the ones with the bigger telescopes and the secret satellites, were refusing to tell us what it was. The pressure became unbearable. Financial markets began to shudder not from a crash, but from a paralytic uncertainty. The simple act of governance became impossible when every leader on Earth was being bombarded with the same single desperate question from their populace. What is out there? The answer, when it finally came, was a masterclass in political pass, stagecraft, and calculated revelation. It wasn't a single press release, but a synchronized global event. The White House, the Kremlin, the Élysée Palace, 10 Downing Street, and the Great Hall of the People in Beijing all announced press conferences within the same hour. The message was to be unified, delivered with the full weight of planetary authority. The faces that appeared on our screens were not second-tier administrators. They were the highest-ranking science advisors, the heads of national space agencies, flanked by stern-faced military officials whose presence alone changed the entire context of the discussion. The air in those briefing rooms was thick with a gravity not felt since the darkest days of the Cold War. The world watched, waiting for a revelation that could change the course of human history. They did not get one. Instead, they got a story. It was a story designed to be just plausible enough to calm the waters, just detailed enough to sound authoritative, and just vague enough to conceal the enormous truth still lurking beneath the surface. The American science advisor, a woman with a storied career at NASA and a face that radiated calm authority, stepped to the podium first. Her words were chosen with the precision of a surgeon. Over the past several weeks, she began her voice steady. There has been considerable public speculation regarding the object designated 3I, Atlas. I am here today, along with our international partners, to end that speculation, a collective intake of breath. The initial reports classifying this object were, as some have correctly deduced, intentionally incomplete. The admission hung in the air, a partial confession. This was done not to deceive, but to protect the integrity of a critical, long-planned international initiative. 3I, Atlas, is not a threat. Rather, it is an opportunity. It is the central target for a previously classified multinational planetary defense preparedness exercise, codenamed Aegis Sentinel. The name echoed across the planet, Aegis Sentinel. It sounded official, powerful, reassuring. The story unfolded with practiced smoothness. For years, the world's major powers had been secretly collaborating on a comprehensive protocol for dealing with a potential asteroid or comet impact. This wasn't just theory, it was a full-scale live-action simulation. They needed a real target, a fast-moving object on a convenient trajectory that could be tracked, analyzed, and used as a focal point for a global stress test. They needed to test everything: detection systems, communication protocols between rival nations, chains of command, public information strategies, and even the logistics of deploying theoretical mitigation technologies. 3I, Atlas, a small, inert, and conveniently timed visitor from the outer solar system, was selected as the perfect drill sergeant for this planetary fire drill. The initial secrecy, they explained, was paramount. To truly test our global response systems, the scenario had to begin as it would in reality, with confusing data, initial uncertainty, and the organic spread of information and misinformation. The first leaked email, they implied without saying so, was a planned injection into the system, a catalyst to see how the public and the media would react. It was a brilliant narrative. It recontextualized everything. The secrecy was no longer a conspiracy. It was a necessary component of the test's design. The conflicting reports were not lies. They were variables in the simulation. The radio silence was not panic. It was a controlled observation period. It was a story that allowed the authorities to admit they had been hiding something, while simultaneously framing themselves as the prudent, responsible guardians of humanity's future. They were not covering up a threat, they were proactively preparing for one. They were protecting us. The relief that swept through the public consciousness was palpable. The stock market stabilized and began to climb. The frantic online chatter shifted from fear of an alien artifact to admiration for the sheer scale and complexity of the secret exercise. We weren't on the verge of an unknown apocalypse. We were merely unwitting participants in the most elaborate and important dress rehearsal in history. The world had been given a release valve for its anxiety, an official explanation that was both grand and crucially non-threatening. But for those who looked closer, for those who refused to let go of the VLT data, the official story was like a beautiful ornate curtain dropped in front of a raging fire. You could admire the tapestry, but you could still feel the heat and see the smoke curling around its edges. The explanation was elegant, but it was also full of holes, gaping voids of logic that the official narrative simply skated over. First, there was the matter of resources. A global preparedness exercise of this magnitude, involving the coordinated efforts of dozens of nations, their militaries, and their most advanced scientific institutions, would represent one of the most expensive and complex undertakings in human history, likely costing trillions of dollars. Why spend that kind of capital on a mere drill? Why now? And why use a real unpredictable interstellar object as the target? Simulations can be run on supercomputers with far more control and for a fraction of the cost. Using a live target introduced 1,000 variables, 1,000 things that could go wrong. It was like learning to defuse a bomb by practicing on a real ticking explosive. It made no logical sense unless the drill was not a drill at all. Then there was the dissonance between the nature of the test and the data we had seen. A planetary defense exercise is by definition about defending against a kinetic impactor, a dumb rock, albeit a very large and fast one. Its composition is important, but only in how it might break apart or react to a mitigation attempt. The VLT data, with its impossibly regular crystalline structure and coherent radio emissions, pointed to something far more complex. It hinted at technology. It hinted at intent. Why would you run an asteroid impact drill on an object that so clearly was not just an asteroid? Why test your defenses against a cannonball when the thing hurtling toward you looks suspiciously like a guided missile? The official statement, for all its polish, never once addressed the spectrographic analysis. They never mentioned the radio signals. They confirmed the existence of a secret program, but offered a purpose for that program that was fundamentally incompatible with the known physical evidence. It was a classic misdirection. They had confirmed the what, a secret international operation, while providing a completely fabricated why. The revelation of Aegis Sentinel plunged the world of scientific and geopolitical analysis into a new, more sophisticated kind of chaos. The conversation shifted from the public forums to the hushed and secured corridors of power and academia. A new, more dangerous game was afoot. We were now living in a world of layered truths. There was the public truth, the story of the drill, which was now the official accepted reality for the vast majority of the population. It was a comforting fiction, a necessary one perhaps, to prevent a global panic that would be more destructive than any physical object. But beneath it lay a second classified truth, known only to the highest echelons of the Aegis Sentinel program. This was the truth of the object itself, the real reason for this unprecedented global mobilization. The existence of the drill was no longer the secret. The times nature of the target times was now the real secret, a secret protected by the convenient and plausible cover story they had just fed the world. This created a perilous new dynamic. Scientists outside the inner circle were now in an impossible position. To publicly question the Aegis Sentinel narrative, to point out that the VLT data made a mockery of the inert target story, would be to risk being branded a fearmonger, a conspiracy theorist flying in the face of a unified global consensus. They would be accused of trying to incite panic, of undermining the very institutions trying to protect humanity. They were effectively silenced by the partial truth, trapped in a web of plausible deniability. The international politics of the situation grew even more complex. On the surface, the joint announcement was a show of incredible unity, but behind the scenes, the old tensions remained. What agreements had been made in the dark, Russia and China, long America's strategic rivals, were now partners in this endeavor. What had they been promised in exchange for their cooperation and their silence? What technologies or information were being shared? The balance of global power was being subtly and perhaps irrevocably rewritten in the shadow of 3i, Atlas. We, the public, were now in the strangely frustrating position of knowing that we were being lied to, but also understanding on some level why. The lie was a shield. But a shield against what precisely? The pressure on the decision-makers must have been astronomical. Imagine being in that room possessing the raw, unredacted data from 3i Atlas. Imagine knowing its true nature, its composition, its origin, its purpose. You are now balancing on a razor's edge. On one side is the truth, a truth so reality-shattering that it could cause the collapse of social order, a panic that could unravel civilization from the inside out. On the other side is a carefully constructed lie, a necessary fiction that maintains stability but requires you to steer humanity through a crisis in total secrecy, trusting no one. Every choice is a gamble with the fate of the species as the stakes. This is the awesome, terrifying burden of knowledge. The midpoint of our story was not an answer but a rephrasing of the question. The mystery had not been solved. It had simply been elevated to a higher security clearance. We had peeled back one layer of the onion, only to find another, more intricate and formidable layer beneath. The world now knew about Aegis Sentinel. The world accepted the reality of a global preparedness exercise, but the object itself, 3i, Atlas, remained an enigma, a cosmic phantom slipping through our fingers. It was now clear that the initial leaked email and the VLT data were not the end of the story, but the opening salvos in a hidden war of information. The official acknowledgement of the drill was not a surrender. It was a strategic repositioning on the battlefield of truth. And as January approached as 3i, Atlas drew ever closer, the real question burned brighter than ever in the minds of those who dared to ask it. If this is just a test, if this is just a drill, then what in the name of all that is holy is the real thing going to be like? The curtain had been pulled back, only to reveal a thicker, darker curtain behind it, and we were left to wonder what kind of performance was being prepared on the hidden stage. The official story was a carefully constructed dam designed to hold back a flood of panic with reassurances. But the leaked email had already created a hairline crack, and through that crack the truth, or what people imagined to be the truth, began to trickle, then pour, then surge. The carefully worded communiques from a consortium of space agencies, speaking of a unique opportunity for a high-fidelity test, were received not as clarification, but as condescension. An insult to a global public, now connected by a nervous system of fiber optics, a public that could smell condescension from continents away. The dam did not hold, it shattered. Almost overnight, an information vacuum formed, and into that void rushed humanity's oldest and most powerful companions, fear, suspicion, and a ravenous hunger for answers. You could feel it in the electric hum of the world's cities. Protests, small at first, then swelling into vast rivers of humanity, flowed through the streets of London, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires. Their placards were a chaotic tapestry of languages, but their message was brutally simple: tell us the truth. They weren't just demanding data. They were demanding a seat at the table, a voice in a conversation that had until now been held in the hushed, sterile environments of mission control rooms. This was no longer an academic exercise for astronomers. It was a deeply personal threat, a shadow falling over every home, a question mark hanging over every child's future. Online, this anxiety metastasized into a digital wildfire. Forums and social media platforms became global detective agencies, crowdsourcing analysis of every scrap of available data on 3i, Atlas. Amateur astronomers with powerful backyard telescopes coordinated their observations, hunting for any flicker or anomaly the professionals weren't sharing. They became the new gatekeepers of knowledge, their live streams drawing audiences that dwarfed network news channels. And with this surge of citizen science came the inevitable undertow of conspiracy. Theories ranging from the plausible to the profoundly bizarre flourished in the fertile soil of official silence. Was this a cover for a new form of orbital weapon? A manufactured crisis to unite a fractured world, or to impose control? Every pixel of leaked telemetry, every frame of grainy footage was dissected, reinterpreted, and woven into 1,000 different narratives. The world had fractured into two irreconcilable realities, the one presented in calm, measured tones by official spokespeople, and the one pieced together in the chaotic, incandescent glow of a million screens. This was more than a loss of faith in a single institution. It was a fundamental erosion of the very concept of expertise, a crisis of trust that struck at the heart of our civilization. If we couldn't trust them with the sky, what was left to believe in? And trapped in the agonizing space between these two worlds were the men and women who actually knew. The astronomers, the orbital dynamicists, the engineers. They were the keepers of the secrets, the ones who had watched 3I, Atlas, not as a distant curiosity, but as an intimate and growing menace. They had seen the raw data, the plots that deviated from every known model, the strange light curves that seemed to mock conventional physics. They were bound by oaths of silence, by non-disclosure agreements that carried the weight of national security, transforming them into prisoners of their own knowledge. Imagine sitting at your console watching a spectrograph that tells a story far more complex than icy comet remnant. Imagine running a simulation for the 1,000th time, only to see the object perform a maneuver that no mindless rock should ever make. Then you go home and you see the news. You see the simplified graphics, the sanitized explanations, the anchor assuring the world that this is a routine, albeit challenging exercise. The lie burns in your throat. You watch your neighbors, your friends, even your own family debate theories that are miles from the terrifying truth you hold. The ethical dilemma is a crushing weight. Your duty to your government, to the fragile stability of society, is pitted against a primal human urge to warn the tribe of the approaching predator. To remain silent feels like complicity, a betrayal of the scientific pursuit of truth. To speak out would mean professional ruin, legal jeopardy, and the potential to unleash a panic so profound it could tear the fabric of civilization apart before 3I, Atlas, ever could. They became ghosts in their own lives, their faces etched with a stress that no one around them could understand. They were living in the future, a future just weeks away in January, while the rest of the world was still debating the present. They held the most important information in human history, and they could not share it. This terrible silence was the breeding ground for the second, more practical question that began to bubble up from the public consciousness. If this is a test, what exactly are you testing? What is the arsenal of the gods that we are preparing to unleash? For the first time, the arcane field of planetary defense was dragged from scientific journals and into the harsh glare of public debate. And the options were as terrifying as the threat itself. The most straightforward, the one that appeals to our most basic instincts, is the kinetic impactor, a hammer blow in the dark. The concept is brutal in its simplicity. You launch a heavy, dense spacecraft at an immense velocity and slam it directly into the approaching object. It isn't about destroying it. You couldn't possibly. It's about changing its momentum, a cosmic game of billiards where the slightest nudge applied early enough can translate into a miss of thousands of kilometers by the time it reaches Earth. We had already proven the principle with the DART mission, a spectacular success that saw a refrigerator-sized craft alter the orbit of a tiny asteroid moonlet Dimorphos. But 3I, Atlas, is no Dimorphos. Its mass, its velocity, its sheer cosmic inertia are orders of magnitude greater. A DART-like mission would be a gnat hitting a freight train. The test in January would require an impactor of a scale never before imagined, something with the mass of a skyscraper accelerated to blistering speeds. And here the terrible calculus begins. What if the impact doesn't just nudge it but shatters it? The object is, after all, an interstellar visitor. We know nothing of its composition. Is it a solid chunk of iron nickel, or a loosely packed rubble pile held together by little more than its own weak gravity? A successful deflection could turn into a catastrophic failure if we simply transform one massive bullet into a shotgun blast of city-killing fragments. Each piece, now on a slightly different and unpredictable trajectory, would become its own independent threat, a swarm of doom overwhelming any possibility of a coordinated defense. The political implications are just as volatile. Who launches this weapon? Who gives the final authorization? If a kinetic impactor is launched from American soil and a miscalculation sends a fragment hurtling towards Beijing or Moscow, it becomes an act of war regardless of the original intent. The cure in this case could be infinitely worse than the disease. If the kinetic impactor is a hammer, the next option is a scalpel, or perhaps more accurately a shepherd's crook. It's called a gravity tractor, an idea of sublime elegance and maddening difficulty. Instead of hitting the object, you fly a massive heavy spacecraft alongside it. You don't touch it. You don't fire anything at it. You simply hover, letting the subtle, persistent pull of your spacecraft's own gravity gently tug on the object over a long period of time. It is the most delicate and predictable method imaginable. There's no risk of fragmentation, no explosive debris. You become a cosmic shepherd, patiently guiding your flock away from danger. The physics are irrefutable, but the practicalities are a nightmare. For an object the size of 3I, Atlas, the spacecraft would need to be colossal, and it would need to maintain its position for years, even decades, to impart a meaningful change in trajectory. We don't have decades. We have months. The test in January could at best be a proof of concept, a demonstration for a threat that might come a century from now. It is useless for the one staring us in the face. A variation on this theme is the laser ablation system, a celestial blowtorch. Here, you would focus a powerful, perhaps nuclear-powered laser onto the surface of 3I Atlas. The intense energy wouldn't be meant to cut it apart, but to vaporize the surface material rock ice metal, blasting it away into space. This plume of vaporized debris acts as a gentle, continuous thruster, pushing the object from the opposite side. It's more powerful than a gravity tractor, more controllable than an impactor, but it assumes we know what the surface is made of. What if the surface is highly reflective, a mirror that sends that colossal energy beaming off into some unknown direction? What if the outgassing from the laser isn't uniform, and instead of a clean push, it sends the object into an uncontrollable spin, making its trajectory even more chaotic and unpredictable? We would be trying to steer a cosmic battleship by lighting a match under one side, blind to its internal structure or how it might react. Every option was a gamble, a throw of the dice with civilization as the stakes. And then there is the last resort, the one solution that everyone thinks of first and every scientist fears the most, the nuclear option. It is the ultimate expression of our species' power and self-destructive tendencies to take the heart of a star, the very engine of creation, and use it as a weapon against the heavens. The idea isn't to obliterate 3I Atlas with a direct hit, a fantasy of Hollywood films. A direct surface detonation would likely just irradiate a crater and potentially fracture the object, creating that same dreaded shotgun effect. The far more sophisticated and terrifying approach is a standoff detonation. You detonate a nuclear warhead at a precise distance from the object's surface. The goal is to bathe one side of 3I, Atlas, in an immense asymmetrical wave of X-rays and neutron radiation. This sudden cataclysmic flash of energy would vaporize the surface layer, creating a massive explosive thrust that shoves the object onto a new path. It is by far the most powerful tool in our theoretical arsenal. It's the only method with enough raw power to deflect something of this mass on such short notice. If the January test is real and the threat is imminent, this is likely the terrible ace hidden up humanity's sleeve. But to use it is to open Pandora's box. The political fallout would be instantaneous and catastrophic. The moment a nuclear weapon is launched into space, the decades-old treaties that have held our world in a fragile peace are rendered void. Is it a planetary defense mission or a clandestine first strike against a terrestrial rival? Who can tell the difference in the frantic minutes after launch? It could trigger a chain reaction of paranoia on the ground, igniting a war of annihilation before 3I, Atlas, even arrives. And the physical risks are just as profound. The standoff method has never been tested. The calculations for the precise yield, the standoff distance, the effect of the radiation on an unknown material composition, it is all theory. A slight miscalculation could either do nothing at all, or worse, blast the object into a cloud of radioactive shrapnel destined to rain down upon Earth's atmosphere. We would be trading a singular predictable impact for a global radioactive poison that could contaminate the biosphere for centuries. Unleashing a star on a leash is a desperate act, a choice you only make when you are absolutely certain that the alternative is extinction. And this is where the deepest, most unsettling question begins to surface, a whisper that starts in the quietest corners of the scientific community and slowly gains momentum. What if the tools are all wrong because we have misidentified the problem? What if we are building a cannon to fight a ghost? We have been proceeding under one fundamental assumption that 3I, Atlas, is a natural object, a mindless wanderer from the interstellar void governed by the elegant and predictable laws of celestial mechanics. We have assumed its anomalies, the faint but persistent non-ballistic trajectory, its strangely uniform albedo, the utter lack of a conventional cometary coma, despite its approach to the Sun, are simply new forms of natural phenomena that our science has not yet encountered. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if these are not signs of new physics, but signs of old technology, of purpose, of design? Look again at the data, but this time with a different lens. A trajectory that changes without outgassing isn't an anomaly. It's a course correction. A uniform surface that doesn't shed dust or ice isn't a strange composition. It's a hull. The lack of a coma isn't a mystery. It's the signature of a cold, inert object, one that is not sublimating under the sun's heat because it was built not to. The terrible thought, the one that the NDAs were truly meant to contain, is that 3I Atlas may not be a rock to be deflected. It might be a probe. An alien intelligence, ancient and unknowable, has sent a messenger to our system, and suddenly the Planetary Defense Test is cast in a horrifying new light. It ceases to be a prudent, if risky, exercise in self-preservation. It becomes something else entirely. Is this test a panicked, premature act of aggression? Are we planning to greet our first confirmed visitor from another star system with the most powerful weapon we have ever devised? The narrative shifts from one of planetary defense to one of interstellar war. The implications are staggering, branching off into 1,000 nightmare scenarios. Perhaps it isn't a passive probe. Perhaps it is a weapon itself, and the test is not a test at all, but a genuine, desperate last-ditch defense against a threat the world's governments know is hostile. The secrecy, the obfuscation, the carefully worded lies, they suddenly make a different, more terrifying kind of sense. You don't tell the world you are about to engage in humanity's first interstellar conflict. You don't announce that you are about to fire a shot that will echo across the galaxy for millennia to come. The object known as 3I, Atlas, is no longer just a physical threat, a problem of mass and velocity. It has become a metaphysical one, a cosmic Rorschach test, onto which we are projecting our greatest fears and our deepest anxieties. Is it a message in a bottle or a bullet in the mail? The answer may lie in the true nature of the event scheduled for January, an event that is less than 2 months away. Is it truly a test of our technology, a drill to see if we can save ourselves? Or is it a test of something far more fundamental, a test of our character, our wisdom, and our place in this vast, silent cosmos? And so the world holds its breath, not for a cataclysm, but for an answer. The final hours of the long wait drain away each tick of the clock, echoing in the silent, cavernous control rooms of a planet united by a single, terrifying question mark hurtling through its backyard. Here, in the sanitized glow of 1,000 monitors at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and in the mirrored halls of Darmstadt and Moscow, the divisions of humanity have become porous, irrelevant. Geopolitics has been suspended, replaced by the stark, unifying clarity of celestial mechanics. You are a silent witness in these rooms, feeling the compressed energy, the quiet hum of minds pushed to their absolute limits. They are not waiting for an impact. The orbital mechanics we detailed earlier assured us of a safe, if unnervously close passage. No, they are waiting for contact. They are waiting for the moment their creation, their silent ambassador, finally reaches its destination after a frantic billion-kilometer chase. This is the culmination of everything you've seen, the frantic calculations, the political brinkmanship, the shadow program brought violently into the light. This is the moment the test, whatever it truly is, begins. The instrument of this test is not what you might imagine. It is not some crude kinetic impactor, a simple cosmic bullet designed to nudge an asteroid off course. That was the technology of yesterday, a sledgehammer for a problem that now appears to require the most delicate surgery. What was launched in absolute secrecy from a submerged oceanic platform weeks ago was something far more sophisticated, a concept born in the most advanced labs on Earth. They call it the Diagnostic Swarm, codenamed Janus. It is less a single probe and more of a mechanical ghost, a gossamer-thin mothership that upon approach will not strike its target but embrace it. Its payload consists of 10,000 individual nanosatellites, each no larger than a grain of sand propelled by microscopic ion thrusters. Released in a precisely choreographed cloud, they are designed to envelop 3I, Atlas, a thinking fog of sensors that will map every millimeter of its surface, taste the faint outgassing from its core, and listen for the faintest whisper of energy from within. Each grain is a marvel, a flying laboratory equipped with spectrometers, magnetometers, and atomic-level imagers. Together, they will build a portrait of this enigma with a fidelity we have never before achieved on a celestial body, let alone one as bizarre and transient as this. They are our eyes, our hands, our senses extended across the void to touch the unknown. For 72 agonizing hours, Janus has been in its terminal approach phase, a silent, desperate sprint across the final 1,000,000 kilometers. The commands were all preloaded. There is no time for human intervention now. The light speed delay, a mere 8 minutes, has become an insurmountable gulf. The probe is on its own, an autonomous intelligence executing the most important mission in human history. In the control rooms, you see the faces of its creators, men and women who have poured their lives into this machine. They watch the telemetry, the green lines of data confirming that their child is still alive, still screaming towards its destiny at over 100,000 kilometers per hour. Every packet of information is a heartbeat from the void. On the main screen, a simulation renders the probe's perspective. You see 3I, Atlas, grow from a single bright pixel into a defined shape. And as it resolves, a fresh wave of unease washes through the mission's architects. The models, the predictions, the frantic theories spun in the preceding months, they all begin to fray at the edges. This object now filling the probe's virtual view defies easy categorization. It is not the lumpy cratered potato shape of a typical asteroid, nor does it possess the ethereal hazy glow of a comet's coma. We had seen its strange non-gravitational acceleration, the slight inexplicable deviations from its calculated path. We had theorized it was due to outgassing from unseen jets of vaporizing ice. But Janus's sensors tell a different impossible story. There is no coma. There is no significant vapor cloud. The object is clean, sharp-edged against the velvet of space. Its rotation is also unnervingly perfect, a slow, deliberate spin around a single stable axis. Most celestial bodies tumble chaotically, cosmic driftwood thrown about by ancient collisions and uneven solar heating. This object moves with the serene, balanced precision of a gyroscope, a motion that seems less natural and more engineered. The thermal imaging is even more perplexing. Instead of the expected temperature variations, a hot side baked by the sun and a frigid side facing deep space, the surface of 3I, Atlas, displays an almost uniform thermal signature. It is as if some internal mechanism is actively distributing heat across its entire body, a planetary-scale thermoregulation system that has no business existing on a dead piece of rock and ice. Every new piece of data deepens the mystery, painting a portrait of an object that seems to actively resist the laws of celestial physics. It is a square peg in the round hole of astronomy. Swarm deployment confirmed a voice, cuts through the hushed tension, calm but electric. On screen, the simulation shows the Janus mothership atomizing, dissolving into a shimmering, expanding cloud. The 10,000 nanoprobes our cloud of sentient dust begin their intricate ballet. They spread out, forming a perfect sphere, 100 kilometers in diameter with 3I, Atlas, suspended at its center. This is the moment of truth. The swarm is not passive, it is active. Microscopic lasers begin to lance out from each grain, scanning the surface, performing active spectroscopy, vaporizing infinitesimal particles for analysis. A flood of data, a torrent of terabytes begins its 8-minute journey back to Earth. The control room transforms. The quiet anxiety is replaced by frantic activity as hundreds of scientists dive into the data streams, their screens filling with graphs, charts, and raw chemical readouts. They are no longer just watching, they are dissecting. The first results are chaotic, contradictory. One sensor suite reports the spectral signature of nickel iron consistent with a metallic asteroid. Another, just meters away, reads basaltic rock. A third detects complex carbon polymers, organic molecules that are the building blocks of life. Yet another registers the unmistakable signature of refined titanium alloy, something that simply cannot be formed in nature. It's impossible. It's as if the object is a chimera, a patchwork of a dozen different celestial bodies stitched together. The magnetism readings are even more bizarre, showing localized, powerful magnetic fields that switch on and off in a structured, non-random pattern. It is not the steady planetary scale field of a solid body, but a complex web of energy. It feels artificial. A murmur spreads through the assembled scientists, a ripple of disbelief and dawning awe. You can see it on their faces as they frantically cross-reference the data streams. The initial confusion gives way to a chilling collective realization. The data isn't contradictory at all. It is perfectly consistent if you abandon one fundamental assumption that you are looking at a natural object. The high-resolution imagery begins to resolve. The swarm, acting as a single multi-billion pixel camera, pieces together a mosaic of the surface. And there, beneath a fine layer of cosmic dust, the truth is laid bare. We see not craters but paneling. We see not geological fissures but weld seams massive and industrial. Faded markings eroded by millennia of micrometeoroids and solar radiation become visible. A fragment of a Cyrillic alphabet here. The ghost of an American flag there. The unmistakable, iconic silhouette of the European Space Agency's logo, pitted and scarred but still legible. The object is not a monolith. It is a collage, a Frankenstein's monster of human space exploration. You are looking at the discarded husks of forgotten probes, the upper stages of Cold War-era rockets, the remnants of failed satellites from a dozen nations, all fused together, compacted into a single dense mass by some unimaginable force. Spectrometers confirm the presence of heat shield materials from Apollo-era capsules, alloys from Soviet Venera landers, and solar panel fragments from the dawn of the space age. This isn't a visitor from another star system. It's a ghost of our own past, a ball of our own cosmic trash that has been flung out into the darkness, only to return transformed and unrecognizable as an omen. But how? How could this cosmic junkyard have been assembled? And how could it have been placed on an interstellar trajectory only to loop back with such impossible precision? The answer is the final devastating revelation. As the swarm completes its analysis of the object's core, it detects not rock or ice but the faint dying energy signature of a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, a specific model used only once on a deep space probe launched in the late 1990 seconds. A probe that officially failed just after leaving Earth's orbit. It never failed. It was the seed. It was the gravitational and magnetic anchor around which this entire object was secretly, deliberately constructed over decades, a clandestine project of unimaginable scale and audacity. The pieces were moved into place by unknown actors, using unknown technologies assembled in the dark side of the solar system. And then it was given a push, a precise gravitational assist from Jupiter, sending it on its long journey out and back. The room is utterly silent now. The truth lands with the force of a physical blow. You watch as a grey-haired mission director slowly takes off his glasses, rubbing his eyes not from fatigue but from the sheer weight of this new reality. 3I, Atlas, was never a threat. It was the target. It was a decoy. This entire global event, the panic, the unity, the multi-billion-dollar response, it was all the carefully planned script of the most elaborate war game ever conceived. The test was not about planetary defense against an alien rock. It was a test of us. It was a meticulously crafted psychological and logistical stress test of the entire planet. They wanted to know if we could detect an object like this. They wanted to know if we could track it. They wanted to see if bitter geopolitical rivals could cooperate, when faced with a common external threat. They wanted to gauge public reaction, to see how the media would handle the story, to measure the spread of panic and conspiracy. The leaked email that started this all, it was never a leak. It was a planned move in the game, a wild card thrown into the simulation to test our information security and our ability to handle uncertainty. The men and women in these rooms were not defending the planet. They were unwitting pawns in a global deception, their genius and dedication used as a measuring stick by some hidden, unaccountable authority. The triumph of the Janus mission, the incredible technological achievement, is instantly rendered hollow, replaced by a profound sense of violation. They did not save the world, they merely proved the simulation worked. They answered the question someone somewhere had asked. As the mission controllers stare at the image of our own spacefaring history, now twisted into the form of a monster on their screens, the elation of discovery curdles into a cold, unsettling dread. They have passed the test, but they have no idea who the examiners are or why the test was administered in the first place. The object continues its silent, graceful arc through our solar system, an inert monument to a vast and terrifying secret. And for the first time, we are forced to confront a reality far more frightening than any alien invasion. The greatest unknown is not what lies in the darkness between the stars. It is the shadows that lie deep within the halls of human power, and the chilling realization that the next time the sky begins to fall, we may not be able to trust what we see or who is telling us to be afraid. And so the silence that followed the light was not one of peace, but of profound, unsettling suspense. Across the planet, in darkened control rooms and observatories perched on lonely mountains, the only sound was the hum of machines and the frantic beating of human hearts. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, we were a species united not by language or culture, but by a single unspoken question hanging in the void. Did it work? Was the great terrible gamble a success? Or had we just borne witness to the prologue of a catastrophe? The data streams, once a torrent of predictive models and frantic calculations, trickled in now with the agonizing slowness of a final verdict. Each photon captured by our telescopes, each faint radio wave pinged back from the void, was a syllable in the universe's answer. You could feel the collective breath of 8 billion people being held a planetary quietude that stood in stark contrast to the kinetic violence we had just unleashed hundreds of millions of kilometers away. Then slowly at first, and then with the cascading certainty of an avalanche, the picture began to form. On screens across the world, orbital plots were redrawn, the elegant, terrifying arc of 3I, Atlas, an inbound trajectory that had been burned into the global psyche, began to shift. It was a change measured in arc seconds, a nudge, almost imperceptible against the cosmic backdrop, yet it was the most significant deviation in the history of our world. The object, that silent traveler from interstellar space, was not gone. It had not been vaporized in a blaze of Hollywood glory. Instead, it had been steered. Gently, precisely, and definitively, its path was bent, its rendezvous with Earth's orbit cancelled. A collision course had become a flyby. A potential endpoint for civilization had become a celestial cautionary tale, a ghost that would haunt our skies for a season before sailing back out into the endless dark from whence it came. The relief was not a sudden explosion of cheers. It was a slower, more complex emotion, a tsunami of feeling that washed over the planet in waves. It was the quiet weeping of an engineer in Darmstadt, the shaking hands of a lead scientist in Pasadena, the solemn, thankful nod exchanged between rival governments in a secure video conference. For we had not just dodged a bullet, we had, for the very first time, reached out and deflected it. We had looked upon the deterministic clockwork universe of Newton and Laplace, a universe where our fate was written in the cold calculus of gravity, and we had written a new line. The event of January was more than a successful test. It was a declaration. It was humanity's assertion that the sky was no longer the sole arbiter of our destiny. The heavens still held immense power, but we were no longer merely its subjects. We were now, however, tentatively a part of its conversation. But as the immediate existential fear receded, it left behind a landscape of complex and troubling questions. The crisis had passed, yet the reckoning was just beginning. This was never just a story about an asteroid, it was a story about us. The success of the mission did not erase the path we took to get there. a path paved with secrecy, deception, and a fundamental breach of trust between the governed and those who govern. The leaked email that started this entire global ordeal, once a catalyst for panic and outrage, was now being re-examined through a new lens. Was it the irresponsible act of a whistleblower that nearly caused mass hysteria, or was it the moral imperative of a scientist who believed humanity had the right to know what was coming? The debate still rages in the halls of power in university ethics departments and on the global digital square. The architects of the Planetary Defense Test maintain their position with stoic conviction. They argue that revealing the full nature of the threat from 3I Atlas prematurely would have served no purpose other than to sow chaos. How could society function under such a sentence of potential doom? What would have happened to the global economy, to social order, to the very sanity of billions of people living for months or years with a cosmic sword of Damocles hanging over their heads? Theirs was a calculated paternalistic gamble, to shoulder the burden of knowledge in secret, to work feverishly in the shadows, and to present the world with a solution rather than a problem. To them, the successful deflection is the ultimate justification, the proof that the ends, the survival of our species, sanctified the controversial means. They argue they didn't lie, they simply curated a terrifying truth until it could be managed. Yet for countless others, that curation feels like a profound betrayal. The secrecy, they contend, created a two-tiered humanity, the few who knew and the billions who were kept in the dark, their right to consent, to prepare, to even make peace with their fate stolen from them. This managed truth established a dangerous precedent. If a threat of this magnitude can be concealed, what else can be? It raises a chilling question about the nature of power in the 21st century. In an age of existential threats, from climate change to pandemics to cosmic impacts, who gets to decide what the rest of us are allowed to know? Who holds the moral authority to place the entire human race on a need-to-know basis? The incident has torn open a new front in the age-old war between security and liberty, a conflict that now extends beyond our atmosphere and into the very fabric of our cosmic awareness. This schism is forcing a complete re-evaluation of international relations. The initial phase of the 3I Atlas project was marked by a tense, almost Cold War-esque secrecy among the few spacefaring nations involved, but the leak shattered that isolation. It forced a reluctant, unprecedented collaboration. Nations that were once geopolitical adversaries found themselves sharing telemetry data, launch capabilities, and advanced computational resources, their mutual survival instinct overriding decades of suspicion. A temporary, fragile alliance was forged in the crucible of a shared threat. Now, in the aftermath, there is a powerful movement to make that alliance permanent. Proposals for a new kind of United Nations body, a Planetary Defense Council, are gaining traction. An organization with the authority to mandate transparency and coordinate a global response to any future threat, free from the veto of any single nation's political agenda. The dream is to build an infrastructure of survival, a planetary immune system, the science that made the deflection possible once the domain of a handful of classified programs is now becoming a global open-source endeavor. The event has triggered a renaissance in asteroid detection and defense research. We are witnessing the birth of a new generation of sky surveys, Sentinel satellites, designed to patrol the dark highways of our solar system. These are not passive telescopes merely cataloguing the night. They are vigilant guardians, their digital eyes scanning for any faint glint of light moving against the stellar background, any hint of a future threat. Their data, many now demand, must be public, instantaneous, and accessible to all, a constant shared pulse of our collective vulnerability and our shared vigilance. We are learning to read the fine print of the cosmos, to decipher the gravitational grammar that tells us what is coming our way, and we are learning how to respond. The kinetic impactor method used on 3I, Atlas, once a theoretical concept, is now a proven tool in our arsenal. But it is just the beginning. The January event has unlocked funding and political will for a whole suite of more advanced, more ambitious technologies. We are talking about concepts that just years ago felt like science fiction, high-energy laser arrays that can slowly vaporize the surface of an object, creating a plume of gas that acts as a gentle, persistent thruster, nudging it off course over months or years. We are developing gravity tractors, massive spacecraft designed not to strike a threat, but to fly alongside it using their own minuscule gravitational pull as a celestial tow rope patiently pulling the asteroid into a safe orbit. There are even more exotic ideas, from solar sails designed to wrap around smaller objects to focus nuclear devices for a last resort scenario against a monolithic threat. We are, in essence, becoming the architects of our own cosmic shield. But every tool we build carries with it a profound dual-use dilemma. A system capable of deflecting an asteroid is also, by its very nature, a system capable of being weaponized. A laser that can nudge a rock can also target a satellite. A kinetic impactor that can save a planet could, in theory, be used to direct a smaller, more manageable asteroid towards a target on Earth. The technology of salvation is inseparable from the technology of destruction. And so, the creation of a planetary defense system is as much a challenge of treaty-making and de-escalation as it is one of engineering. We must build safeguards, not only against threats from the outside, but also against the darker impulses from within. The greatest danger may not be the next 3I, Atlas, but the temptation for a single nation to seize control of this newfound power, to become the sole gatekeeper of Earth's security. This is the indelible, complex mark left by the visitor from another star. It held up a mirror to our civilization, and the reflection is both inspiring and terrifying. We saw our own brilliance, our capacity for incredible ingenuity, our ability to unite and overcome a challenge that would have meant certain doom for any other species in the history of this planet. You can feel the shift in our collective consciousness. We walk with our heads held a little higher, a quiet confidence born from the knowledge that we are not helpless passengers on this spinning blue marble. The dinosaurs looked up and saw only their doom. We looked up and we saw a physics problem, and we solved it. This realization has infused our culture with a new sense of purpose, a renewed vigor for exploration and scientific discovery. It has inspired a new generation to look to the stars not with fear but with ambition. Yet in that same mirror, we also saw our flaws laid bare. We saw our penchant for secrecy, our tribal instincts, our deep-seated distrust of one another. We saw how easily we could fracture, even in the face of a common enemy. The crisis revealed the fragility of our institutions and the precariousness of a global order, where a single leaked document could bring us to the brink of societal collapse. We have been granted a reprieve, a second chance bought with genius and with luck, but we have also been given a stark and unambiguous warning. The universe is vast, ancient, and indifferent. It operates on timescales that mock our fleeting existence, and it contains forces that dwarf our most powerful creations. 3I. Atlas was, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively minor threat, a manageable size discovered with just enough time to act. What happens when the next one is larger, faster, or detected when it is already rounding the orbit of Mars? This is the dual legacy of the January event, a legacy of empowerment and a legacy of profound humility. We have climbed a new mountain and can see a broader horizon, but from this new vantage point we can also see how many more far larger mountains lie ahead. The journey that began with a cryptic email that spiraled into a global crisis of faith and fear and climaxed in a flash of light in the darkness has not truly ended. It has simply brought us to the beginning of a new chapter in the human story. In this chapter, we are no longer defined solely by the history we create on the surface of our world, but by the future we choose to build in the cosmos that surrounds it. The debates about truth and security will continue. The diplomatic struggles to build a unified planetary defense will be long and arduous, and the search for other threats in the darkness will never ever cease. Because we now understand something fundamental. We live in a cosmic shooting gallery, and our ticket for survival is not a matter of chance, but a matter of choice, of vigilance, and of wisdom. The story of 3I Atlas is a reminder that the greatest discoveries are not always of new worlds or distant stars, but of our own potential, our own fallibility, and our own shared responsibility to protect the only home we have ever known. The night sky will never look the same. It is no longer just a canvas of distant twinkling lights. It is a frontier, a challenge, and a promise. And out there in that silent waiting darkness, our future is waiting.